If you clicked on this video, then you are most likely interested in learning how to make computer games using GameMaker, and if that is indeed the case, then I have good news for you. In this upcoming series of videos, we are going to go through the very beginnings of the engine. We're going to talk about how to navigate your way around the user interface. We're going to talk a lot about code. We are going to talk a lot about how to make your game do things, and by the time we're done here, you should have a pretty good idea of how you can make GameMaker do more or less whatever you want it to do. So let's get started by downloading and installing the thing. GameMaker is free to use. If you want to actually sell your game, you have to pay Yo-Yo Games money. It's a pretty straightforward situation. So to find GameMaker, you can go to GameMaker.io. This is GameMaker's homepage website. And you can go over to the download section over here. And this is going to give us some options for what exactly we want to download. Worth mentioning, you can find GameMaker on Steam, and it is basically the same product, but I'm going to not be using Steam here just because that's an additional complication that I don't want to deal with right now. So there's a couple of versions that you can go for. If you are, like many people, on Windows, you can download the Windows version. There is also a macOS and a Linux version. Officially, the Linux version is only supported on Ubuntu, but you can try your luck with other distros and see what happens. Sometimes it works, sometimes it explodes spectacularly. So as of my posting this video, the current version of GameMaker is going to be GameMaker 2024.14. Yes, it's a dumb version number. It's a long story. I'm not going to get into it right now. Anyway, a couple of months after I post this video, GameMaker is due to come out with a new LTS version, which is basically like a version of the engine that is not supposed to change for several years. It's supposed to be pretty bug-free, and you should generally be able to count on it working. As of right now, the current LTS version is 3 years old, and it's missing a bunch of the more recent features, so I wouldn't recommend using it. But after probably about January 2026, that's when LTS 2026 is supposed to come out. You might want to use that if you want a, as I said, stable and not frequently changing version of GameMaker. I'll leave a pinned comment on this video with some more information when that becomes relevant. So once you've downloaded GameMaker, we can go to wherever it downloaded to. I believe that is going to be in my downloads folder, and we can just double-click run the installer. So GameMaker will run on just about anything. It's pretty lightweight. It's not like Unreal Engine or Unity if you've ever used something like that. It's more like RPG Maker or Godot in terms of how it utilizes system resources. This computer here I'm running this on is the most average computer ever from 2019, 2020. Ryzen 5 3500 and a GTX 1070. For those of you who are into that sort of thing. But GameMaker should be able to run on pretty much anything with a dual-core CPU or better. It doesn't need a graphics card. It's perfectly happy with integrated graphics. It doesn't need a ton of memory. Just general computer advice, I would recommend running it off of a solid-state hard drive and not a spinny mechanical drive, but that's pretty much normal for all software in the modern day. And anyway, that only really affects how long it takes to start up when you double-click the icon. So the first time you run GameMaker, you're going to see this little splash screen, and you're going to see a little progress bar as GameMaker installs its compiler tools. So once GameMaker has finished its first time setup, after you open the IDE, I promise it will be a little bit faster than that. We're going to be greeted with this. So firstly, on the side, there is some default learning material. If you're more interested in reading through some of this than listening to me go on, feel free to click on that and see what it's all about. At the top, there is a first-time setup wizard, which will attempt to guide you through creating a project for the first time. I am going to close that, and I'm going to basically do its job myself. So there is a recent projects list. Once you've got a couple of projects under your belt, when you open GameMaker, the most recent ones will appear here. Otherwise, we can go to New, and we can select our project type firstly. So there's a game, there's a live wallpaper, and there's a game strip. Those second two are not that interesting to us right now. Those are other things that GameMaker and its parent company Opera like to do sometimes for some reason. You probably clicked on this video to hear about games though, so we're going to be focusing on that. There's a couple of different project templates if you are interested in learning by taking an existing project, poking around inside it and seeing what happens. You might be interested in a template project, but other than that, there are two options for blank games. So I think it's probably safe to say that about 90% of you are interested in using GameMaker for making pixel art games. And if that is indeed what you want to do, the two blank game templates, the blank pixel game is going to be the one that you want to click on. The only difference between these is that there is a setting which affects how graphics are scaled when you draw them to the screen, and that has a tendency to mess up pixel art. And people showing up on the subreddit or on the Discord or the forum and like complaining that their pixel art looks terrible and they don't know why is a pretty common occurrence, unfortunately. And I've got some beef with Yo-Yo Games for not making this the default option, knowing that most people want to use GameMaker to make pixel art games. Other than that, there's no difference, and you can change the setting within your project at any time. But if you're interested in making pixel art games, just save yourself the headache and click this second option over here, the blank pixel game template. In the meantime, I suppose I should give this project a name. I'll call it Tutorial Project, and we can select our scripting language. So I wish GML Visual was better. It would be really useful to have some sort of visual scripting system in GameMaker that actually was like good enough to use, to make everyday use of. But unfortunately, GML Visual isn't great, and maybe someday it'll be improved, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen any day soon. So we're just going to go with GML code here. I generally would encourage people to not be afraid of using code anyway. It's not terribly difficult. The scripting language that GameMaker uses, GML, is fairly similar to JavaScript if you've ever used that. And if not, don't worry, we're going to get there in future videos. So now I think that we've set everything up, we can just say, let's go. And when you create a new project, GameMaker is going to have a little think, and it's going to present you with this. So this is the Welcome tab. It is going to show you around to different parts of the IDE, or the Integrated Development Environment, if you like big words. I am going to basically go through all this within this video, so I think we can safely X out of this. You can X out or middle click the tab to make it go away. And now we can have a look around inside the IDE. So most of what I do in this video is just going to be showing you around in here and showing you where the major important elements are, things that would be relevant the first time that you open the engine. I'm not going to get too deep into actually like making a game that does something, because I think there's plenty to be getting on with when it comes to just showing you around. So firstly, up in the upper left, there is a very traditional menu bar with some various options. File menu, save, open, new project, that kind of thing. You've used computer software before, I'm sure this is nothing new to you. And there's a couple of other menu bars with various tools and or actions which might or might not be relevant as you continue making your game. In particular, in the help manual, if you say open manual, GameMaker's official documentation is honestly pretty good. I'm just going to say use the online manual because that's, like, it does get updated periodically. GameMaker's official documentation is pretty good on the whole. There are some pages that are, like, incomplete, but if you wanted something like a GameMaker textbook, this is probably the closest you're going to get. You could read this cover to cover if you'd like. A lot of people do. A lot of people get value out of that kind of thing. Anyway, moving on. Below the menu bar, there's a couple of icons for things that you can quickly access, common things that you might want to do. So there is a home button if you want to close the project and return to the home page like this. We can click on a recent project to come back. New project, open project, save project, things like that. Build executable. These four buttons in particular. So debug your game, run your game, stop your game if it's already running, and clean the compiler cache. Those are probably the most frequently used buttons in this toolbar. In especially particular, the run button has a keyboard shortcut for F5, and if you spend any decent length of time doing this, you're probably going to get tired of moving your mouse over here to click the button over and over again, and the F5 keyboard shortcut is probably going to become your best friend. Moving over, there's game options, which is going to allow you to view some settings related to your game. The setting that I mentioned between like the blank regular game template and the blank pixel game template does live in there somewhere, by the way. There's a help icon, and then there's some other navigation icons. Moving over to this corner, we've got, and I meant to talk about this at the beginning before we even like finished installing it, but things are moving too fast. I know that a lot of people don't like having to sign in to their software, and a lot of people have opinions about that. And you can sign into GameMaker if you've got an Opera account, Opera being the company that owns GameMaker. Yes, Opera, the web browser. Or if you have an older GameMaker account that you want to sign in with. I'm not going to do that because you can use like 95% of the engine without being signed in. The only place it really comes into play is when you're trying to distribute your game. And again, I know a lot of people would rather not have to sign into their software if they don't have to, and possibly more importantly, I don't remember my GameMaker password and I don't feel like digging it up right now, so I'm not going to sign in. Pretty much everything that I do in this series of beginner GameMaker videos is going to be done not signed in. Below that, you click on the target button and you're going to be greeted with this. If you are signed in, there will be a bunch more options for different like operating systems that you can run your game on. By default, gx.games and test are always going to be available. Gx.games is basically if you want your game to be a web game. Think like the old Flash games. And test is going to be like the default platform for whatever you're running GameMaker on. If that's Windows, it'll be Windows. If it's on Linux, it'll be Linux. And if you are signed in, you will have options to do things like build for other operating systems besides the one you're using, and also mobile, and also various consoles if you have a developer account. Otherwise, this is pretty much only going to be important when you're actually trying to like distribute your game. There's also a little sticker up here, by the way, that says the current GameMaker IDE and runtime version. The runtime being basically GameMaker's compiler tools. If you ever wanted to know which like version you're using. I think that's enough of that. So down here at the bottom, there's a couple of output windows in tabs. I'm not going to go through all these right now. They're all going to be empty. Output is probably the most useful one most often. This is where like status messages when you're running your game are going to appear. Search results, you can probably guess what that does. Compile errors, you can probably guess what that does. These other things are a little bit more specialized, and we'll probably get to them at some later date. Over here on the right side, there is the asset browser. So there's a quick access bar, which is going to default to being open. And honestly, a lot of the time, I don't find that's the best use of space, so I'm going to collapse it. If you have a big project, you can do things like favorite assets and like bookmark them for later, which might be helpful if you have a lot of assets that you need to sort through. But since we're just getting started, we're not going to really think much about that. I'm going to zoom in on this to make it a little bigger. When you create a new GameMaker project from scratch, the only asset in the asset browser is going to be Room 1. And rooms are basically GameMaker levels. These are the stages where everything in your game that you see when the game is running lives in more or less like physical, at least visual space. When you get to building levels, everything that you do is going to go into the room editor. But I'm going to X out of that for now, and we're going to get back to it later. This panel on the left, by the way, this is the inspector. When you click on something in the asset browser, you will get to see some basic properties pertaining to it. So this room, for example, if you want to edit the like size of the room, the size of the level, you can do that from the asset browser. You can also look at some other advanced things, which we'll get into later. So other asset types, if you go and right-click in the asset browser and go to Create, there's a whole bunch of asset types that you can select from. Probably the most important ones are going to be objects, and objects are going to be a representation of, well, a entity in your game which does things and can have things happen to it. The player, for instance. And also, the other really important one is going to be sprites. And sprites are going to be pretty much all the graphical resources that will go into your game. And of course, if you right-click and go to Create, there's a bunch of other asset types that you can create. A lot of them are important in their own rights. Fonts, scripts, shaders, that kind of thing. But when you're just getting started, rooms, objects, and sprites are probably the ones that you'll be concerned with most immediately. So, oh, and by the way, if you want to organize things, you can create groups, which are basically folders in the asset browser. And you can organize this however you want. Let me name this like player stuff or something like that. And we can, if we wanted to like drag the object and the sprite into that folder, we could do so. We should probably give these a name. So the traditions of naming things in GameMaker are somewhat of a matter of hot debate. Probably the most common naming convention that you will see people using in GameMaker when it comes to naming their assets is going to be something like, if we have an object and we want it to represent the player, obj underscore player. If we have something like a sprite and we want to if we want the sprite to represent the player, we might name it something like SPR underscore player. If we have a room, which is going to be like, I don't know, the first level or something like that, we might call it RM underscore level 1, something to that effect. This is probably the most common naming convention that people will use. There are others. For example, instead of using an underscore, we might use a like a capital letter to denote space between words. Sometimes, instead of using like a 3-letter abbreviation, people will just use like a 1-letter abbreviation, like O player or something like that. It doesn't really matter as long as you're able to find the things that you're looking for. It's not like GameMaker doesn't have an enforced style guide or anything like that when it comes to asset names. Anyway, so let's start by actually making the sprite look like something, because right now it's just kind of a blank image. I can go and click edit image, and this is going to open up a little image editor. I am not really going to spend a lot of time making this like artistically interesting, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make a like yellow fill, and I'll just draw a smiley face. And that's going to be our player. If you have an existing sprite that you'd like to use instead of drawing it, you can click the import button. That will open up a file finder. This computer that I'm running this on is like the cleanest installation of Windows possible, like aside from setting the desktop background. So I don't really have any other sprites that I want to add to this game, at least not at the moment. So on its own, that sprite isn't going to do anything, but we can assign it to an object, and each object in your game can have a sprite assigned to it. By the way, before I move on to objects, if we go and go back to sprites for a minute, sprites are allowed to have multiple images contained within them. This is often used for things like animation. If we go to the edit sprite button and click this plus over here, we could create additional images within the sprite. Since I don't really know what else to draw, I think I'm just going to give this one a blue fill. Now maybe we can go and I drew a smiley face in the last one, so I think we can give this guy a little frowny face. And now we've got a sprite with two sub images in it, and you could do whatever you want with that. You are also allowed to import like a sprite sequence with multiple sprites inside it. I'm gonna get rid of that second one for now. And now we can move on to objects. So objects can have a sprite assigned to it. You can just click and drag from the asset browser to the like the sprite box in the object editor, and that will assign the sprite to it. You could also just click on this like text label, and it will give you the option to select none, or you could click through and find the sprite that you want. Generally, clicking and dragging from the asset browser is going to be easier. There's also a bunch of other pieces of like settings and what have you that you can edit within objects, but the same way that I ignored most of the like advanced sprite features, I think I'm going to also ignore a lot of the like specialized object features. Anyway, this events window over here is going to be pretty important. Events are, well, events which will be processed by your object when something happens in the game. If you click add event, or if you right click inside this events window, you can say add event, and there's going to be a whole bunch of different things that you can choose. Some of them are pretty everyday, such as the create event happens when the object is created. The step event is going to be what happens every frame of the game, basically, if you want the object to execute some code continuously over time. There's a whole bunch of them. If I were to add, say, a create event, oh yes, I forgot that you did this. The first time you click on an event, GameMaker will ask you if you want GML code or GML visual. I set this when I created the new project. I guess GameMaker just forgot. Yeah, let's set that to GML code, and also let's check the don't ever ask again button. Again, I wish GML visual was better, but it just has some problems that make it difficult to use, and anyway, code isn't that bad. So when I do that, we'll open up this here little text editor, and we can type code into this. I will not get into any code today. I think this video is already long, and I do think there's already enough stuff to take in this video without worrying about code, but that's where you're going to be writing a lot of the code that's going to happen in your game. So before I end this video, I would like to present something on the screen that we can actually look at. So if I open up the room editor, we're going to see something like this. It's going to be a grid. You can zoom in, zoom out, pan around. If you've ever used an image editor, a lot of the controls are probably fairly familiar to you. So rooms have different layers, which can have different types assigned to them. So there's like the background layer, which is going to be the solid fill color. There's an instance layer, which will be there by default. And if you want to add an instance to your game, you can go and click and drag it from the asset browser into the room editor. Really old versions of GameMaker, like back when I started using it back in like 2011, had a much worse way to like get objects into the room. And then when the current version of GameMaker came out in like 2016, 2017, suddenly the room editor got like completely overhauled, and I was like so confused. Like, you mean I can just do this and I don't have to do anything weird to put an object in the room? Imagine that. Anyway, so these are going to be instances of obj_player. The distinction between objects and instances of an object is a fairly important one, which we will be spending quite a bit of time on. throughout the series of videos. But anyway, if we want a an instance of obj_player in the room, we can do that. You'll notice that some additional stuff has appeared in the inspector on the side, and that is because not only can objects over here have their own properties, but instances of objects within a room can also have their own properties. Anyway, that's fun stuff. So now if I were to run the game, which we can do by going to build run, or we can just click the little play button over here, or we can just hit the F5 button. GameMaker is going to do its thing. And it's going to pop up a window, and we've got our little guy with a smiley face just sitting here in the middle of the room. Doesn't do anything, not going to move around because I haven't written any code for it, but this is essentially the hello world of games, is just getting something like this on the screen. Next time, we will be getting into some code, and we will spend some time making this guy here do some interesting things. And I think that brings me to the subject of future videos. So, I've made a lot of videos on GameMaker over the years. Some of them are fairly beginner-friendly, and some of them are a lot more complicated. I've spent a lot of time talking about 3D over the years in particular. When you're just starting out, it's going to be a good idea to take things one step at a time and not, like, try to dive straight into the more complicated things. I color code the thumbnails for my GameMaker videos so that people can keep them straight at a glance. For example, the red ones are typically 3D stuff. The grayish silver ones are going to be beta features, which have been recently added to the engine. And in continuing that tradition, this series of videos for beginners is going to be color-coded basically like what you saw when you clicked on it. And that way, if you're clicking through my channel, it should be pretty obvious which videos belong in which category. Beginner stuff, or advanced stuff, or Let's Plays, or whatever. I'll also have these in a playlist, which you can just open up and watch in order, if you'd like. So I suppose that's enough for now. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games. I do like to make videos about all kinds of GameMaker stuff, so if you want to see more of this, feel free to subscribe. I also do post a bunch of Let's Plays, that wasn't a joke. I have a Patreon, so if you want to contribute to the channel, links to that can be found down below. You should all go check out Wizard Ducks and the Lost Hat, which is one of the games that I like to work on when I'm not doing YouTube stuff. I will have a Steam page linked down below. I hope you all found this useful, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Zenjamin, Squarecrow, Spy Games, Pixelated Pope, Manta Ray, GameMaker, GameArt Indie, Edward Holt, DJ Gibbles, and Bokeh for supporting these videos. If you want to contribute to the channel, head on over to the Patreon page down in the video description to join the fun.